This is a little run through of the relay and fuse panel on the MicroSquirt Porsche 944. And all it is a kick panel. I think it's one of my other videos that I made on this channel. I had shown some earlier steps of me building this. But this is the, how it is today. It's been like this for over 2 years. So, let's see. It looks kind of like a wreck. There's a bunch of spare coils of wire, but it's kind of taken down for a little bit of maintenance, and I wanted to show a friend how it worked. So the kick panel normally bolts up, just how you would never see any of this normally, but it's down right now. And normally there's a bunch of HVAC stuff back here if you have AC. My car doesn't have AC. And then the previous owner had built, I'm assuming, this little aluminum bracket. It has these two screw holes here that bolt up to these two holes there. So, I don't know. Your mileage may vary on that, but that's how my kick panel bolts up. And all I did was I took some wood, some self-tapping screws, and I bolted everything down like this. I have a 6-gang fuse block from AutoZone. Bussman, I think, was the brand. Whatever that is. You can probably find this for $6, $7 or so. And this is a junction box. I think I got it at like Home Depot or something for a couple dollars. And of course this is the ECU over here and a couple relays. These are just generic 30-40 amp relays from like Amazon or something like that. And a lot of wiring, but it's actually pretty simple. I'll go through it. So let's start with turning the switch on. You start the car. So ignition switch on a stock car goes out to the ignition coil, among other things. So what I did was I went to the ignition coil and I took the black wire, which is the switch 12 volts. You would think black would be ground, but it's actually not. Black is actually switch 12 volts. The green is a pulsed ground from the DME in a stock car. So you take the black wire. You can take it other places, but that's just where I took it. That comes in here, and my labeler, well, it's kind of all covered up. My labeler was like $10 or $15. This says ignition switch below it. This red wire comes in. I extended that black wire up through the firewall back into the car. This comes into my junction box. These are just little eyelets that I crimped and heat shrinked on. You just take them, you put the screw in, they clamp down. That comes in here, and I'll try and show you where everything goes. Follow this up. This goes into our main relay here. So the main relay, as you can guess, this is not the load wire. These two fat wires are what actually carries the current. So this other wire here, if you follow it, comes out to one of these two pins. I can't really tell, but one of these two, they'll go to the same place. So here, and I probably should at some point redo this. This is a crappy job. This is a ground, and if you follow this little 1-pin connector, there's a little ground spot right up there below the dashboard that I grounded it to. So these 3 pins are all grounds. One of them goes to the main relay. So whenever you hit the ignition switch, 12 volts comes in through here. This relay comes on. So what that does is completes a circuit between these two fat, 10 gauge or whatever they are wires. So this wire goes to the battery, and this other wire, the shinier one, comes down here and connects to this lug, which again is a little eyelet. And when this lug gets 12 volts, that's passed along to all 6 of the 6-gang fuse block. So at that point, I just chose fuses appropriately for whatever the outputs were. This first one is for the ECU itself. You can see that comes out here. I say pin 1, which is, if you look at the ECU pin out, pin 1 is the 12 volts for the ECU. So that goes into my harness and goes in here, this red wire or something. Maybe it's, I don't know, whatever the 12 volt pin is for the ECU. So that gets whatever they told me in the brochure to use for the fuse. So that's fused. Injectors, same thing. Injectors go out to the harness, this connector. There's also a spare 12 volt wire with it for some reason. I forget, it's been a couple years. And then my crank sensor and auxiliary air valve, my idle valve, are also powered up through this connector. So I kind of use the connector as a splice because I didn't know what I was doing when I made this. Anyway, next one, wideband, pretty self-explanatory. We get whatever the fuse they call for in the instructions manual 5 amps or whatever it normally is for a wideband, so on and so forth. Over here is where it kind of starts to get interesting. That's where you kind of see this rat's nest kind of start to make sense. So you see, you can't read it, but it says fuel pump relay, FP relay, and then fuel pump. So these two pins, this one is some low power fuse. I think it's, like 2 amps or something. And this one is 20 amps, I think, which is the factory fuse rating for the fuel pump. So you see there's a fuel pump relay here, of course. And all I did was, so I have 12 volts. Okay, main relay comes on, right? 12 volts comes in through here. And our main relay, let's see, passes on. So 12 volts comes into the fuel pump relay. The ground side for that does not come out through one of these 3 up to the chassis. It actually comes in through here. It's kind of hard to see it, but it's this one. This purple wire, and this purple wire goes into the harness. And that is the ground provided by the ECU whenever it sees cranking RPM. And you'll see that pretty often in most OEM and in standalone applications. That's just how it is. It provides a ground versus a 12 volts, and you provide the 12 volts via the main relay. So 2 conditions have to be met for this relay to come on. That's A, ignition switch turns on, it's your main relay, and B, this sees cranking RPM, and that provides the ground. So once there's a ground and a voltage, this comes on, and then you can see 20 amps is then taken from this fuse, goes in here, and then I have it coming out here, and then this goes somewhere, I think it's, yeah, damn it. I need to tuck that at some point. It's been a couple years, I should do it. That goes into the harness somewhere under there. I just spliced into the factory. It's a green and black striped wire, pretty thick, that goes to the back of the car down, it's underneath this little thing, but on the driver's side of the car. You just pull that up and you'll see it. I just teed into that basically. And I pulled the fuse out of the stock fuse block down there, and it works perfectly. So that's how I basically gave 20 amps fused to the stock fuel pump and deleted the DME relay, which is these 2 relays. That's all it is. Other 2 relays are really simple. They just replace, the fan relay just replaces the factory fan switch that's, threads into the radiator. All I did was take 12 volts, jumpered off one of these relays. Looks like the main relay. Or maybe fuel pump, I have no idea. And the ground is actually a spare output. I just used the F-idle wire from the MicroSquirt. And in the software, I just told MicroSquirt, whenever the coolant temperature is above a certain 170, 180 degrees, give that pin a ground. So whenever that condition is met, this pin becomes a ground, passes that on here to the fan relay. This is getting 12 volts whenever the car is on, of course, and it just takes 12 volts, or sorry, it's this little bundle of wire right here, this twisted pair. This is just part of the stock harness that I extended through to the firewall, and that basically just completes the circuit that the fan switch normally would have completed. So I just extended the fan switch wiring back into the car and made the relay the switching point instead of the fan switch being the switching point. So pretty easy. Now I have full control over the fans and yada yada yada. Ignition switch is pretty easy. Ignition relay, same idea as everything else. Main relay comes on, 12 volts comes through. Its ground is this other one, whatever one of these is not the main relay. Grounded, and then 12 volts in the battery comes in, other wire goes out to the coils. Just to relay them, I don't want everything going through the ignition switch. These early cars don't have the most robust ignition switches, so I've had to replace a few. That's pretty much it. It looks like a rat's nest. Actually works pretty well, and it's been perfect for 2.5 years, and I don't know. I'm hoping to tuck some of the wiring later, but I probably won't. So, hope that helped.